Hey everyone, let's go ahead and get started. And if other people join in, we'll just, the door is open. They can always join in, not a big deal. Okay, so this is a very basic introduction to Swift UI. Hopefully after this introduction, well, not this app, but hopefully after this introduction, you will feel comfortable with creating Swift UI applications. So let me go ahead and first run Xcode and create a brand new project, iOS project, app. And we can just name it anything we want, learn SwiftUI. Make sure that you select SwiftUI as the interface, because I think that is going to allow you to create SwiftUI applications. So let's go and do that. Desktop. All right. So, and you can write, let me go ahead and open up the comments. You can write your chat in the comments. So is there anyone who has not used SwiftUI at all or looking at this for the first time? Or is everyone hopefully familiar with a little bit with SwiftUI? We can go through anyone. So everyone has worked with SwiftUI. You can give like a reaction. I think that's like a reaction button. Where is it? Yeah, reaction, and you can give like a thumbs up if you have already worked with SwiftUI at least once. Okay, so David say that David has already worked with that. Okay, all right. So it looks like some of you will have already worked with it. All right, let me make sure that the font size is good. Hopefully that will be more visible. All right, so SwiftUI is Apple's new UI framework for building the user interface. All right. And so instead of using storyboards or programmatic UI and UI kit, it has become much more easier to build applications with SwiftUI, or at least an interface with SwiftUI. And you can see that I haven't really written any line of code. Everything that you see is already there when you create a default project. This part, obviously, this is where we write the code. And on the left side is a preview. So whatever we're building over here on the left side, it's being reflected on the right side. So it's live. So that's the cool thing about SwiftUI is if I go ahead and change something, let's say that if I change the font of the text, it's going to be live. And you can see the font of the text just got bigger. Or I can go ahead and change the background color or something, and you will see that those things will be live. So I can say color.red or something. There we go. So you will definitely work faster when you're working with SwiftUI. Let's go and take a look at what each of this means. We are creating it's a struct. Content view is the name of the view, which means this is the thing that will be visible on the screen. And it is conforming to the view protocol, which basically says that you need to implement the body. So whatever you return from the body will be displayed on the screen. So if I return from the body a text control or a text view, that will be the only thing that will be displayed on the screen. All right. So the body, you have to return a view. View means that something that gets displayed on the screen. And whatever you return will be, well, it will be visible. So like text. But I can also return a button. I can create a button. I can say, press me. And now you can see that it has changed to a button. I can click on it. Nothing really happens, but at least I can see the button. All right, so it's definitely very, very fast when you are creating your user interface with SwiftUI. Now, if I want to add multiple things, I can use a vertical stack, which means VStack. Anything you're going to put inside the VStack, it will be stacked vertically, hence the word vertical stack. So you should be able to see once it loads. Sometime for some reason, it takes time. It shouldn't take that much time to load this. I haven't really done anything. All right. Sometimes you can see it's taking a while. It actually shouldn't be taking that long, but here we go. So everything is now stacking vertically, the text and another text. And then if you need a button inside there to stack up vertically, you can create a button. And now you have a button. So you can see that your development with SwiftUI, at least for the interface that you're creating, becomes super fast. Just like a V stack, meaning a vertical stack, you also have a H stack, which means horizontal stack. And now you can see that all these items are horizontally aligned. If you have done any web development, this is kind of like, I like to think of it as a flex box. So flex box in web development, you can display horizontal and vertical. So it's the same idea over here. All right. Now, remember when you were doing UI kit and you had to create a table which is scrollable and you want to display something in the table like numbers. It would take you a bit of a code like UI table view and UI table view controller to create those things. But with SwiftUI, you can just use the list control and pass in, well, we can pass in anything we want over here, conforming to random access collection. But let's say that if I simply want to make sure that I can display 10 numbers. So let me first go ahead and display these things. So you'll see that how quickly I'm able to display a scrollable table. I mean, I can go ahead and change it to 100. And you can see it's crashing, but here we go. I'm using Xcode 14, but Xcode 13, everything should work fine for you. So it doesn't really matter. And you can see that with 3 lines of code, I was able to create these, this nice table view, and I can scroll it. It looks nicer, right? The first argument that you provide over here is the actual collection which you're going through. And the second one we're providing is how would each item inside the array differentiate, or inside this range differentiate itself. So self means that that particular thing will be just able to differentiate by itself, like the hash value. And it's just a number. But if you have something else, let's say that if I have a variable called, I don't know, animals, and in that animals array, I have, you know, different kind of animals, let's say whatever, horse or something. And if I want to go through each of these and want to display it, I will simply go ahead and replace it with animals. And probably name it a little bit better and not the index. And you can see that now we are able to display the animals. So it becomes very, very easy for you to create this kind of a user interface, a UI, that would have taken quite a long time if you were doing some sort of UI kit development. And there are other controls available. I mean, there is a image. You can use an image to display an image. There are so many other things that you can do. Right? I think you can see the image control right there. This can read the image from the bundle, or there is another one called, I believe it's called async image, that is going to be able to read the image from some sort of a URL. So all of this is kind of like available to you that you can actually use. All right. Let's go ahead and try to see if we can actually use an image. I'm going to go ahead and, well, try to download an image first. So I will say Unsplash. And you can obviously use any image you want. There are sometimes I do see that there are some issues with displaying the image, but like you have to put it in the right place. And I still haven't figured out that what exactly those issues are. But let's go and try to add an image. There we go. I think you do have to put it in the assets. Sometimes when you put it in the asset, it doesn't work. Sometimes it works. It's kind of weird. So let's say that if I call this image, image 1, I think it's already JPEG, I believe so. Okay, so image is in the assets, and you'll see that sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't work, so it's kind of weird. Now, if I do want to show an image, let's go ahead and remove that part. We don't want to show the list. We will use the image and then just the name of the image, which I believe is image 1. And you can see the image is now covering the whole thing, but we can also call resizable on it so that it kind of tries to fit, but it's just trying to fit the screen, which is still stretching. And that is where you can even set the aspect ratio, which you can see that we're setting the aspect ratio over here. I'm just going to say fit. So now hopefully it will fit in a nice way. All right, so you can see that even displaying images becomes much more simpler. If I want to add a text, working on the computer, like some sort of a text associated with the image, I can add that, and you will see that that particular text should appear right underneath it. If I want to push everything up, I can use a spacer view, which is just going to push everything up. And now you can see now it's on the kind of like on the top. All right. So these are the basic controls of SwiftUI. I mean, there are other controls like segmented. Do we not use scale to fit or scale to fill anymore? Scale to fit and scale to, let's see, scale to fit. Let's see what difference. Will it be the same exact thing? I guess you can use aspect ratio or scale to fit and scale to, I think the other one is scale to fill. Scale to fill, I guess, means that it's going to try to fill the available space it has, and that also works. So I guess you can use any of these things. Aspect ratio might provide you a little bit, I think it's aspect ratio option and the content mode. But yeah, you can use any of those things. All right. All right. But this is still very basic. I mean, meaning it's just the UI, but how can we change something? Meaning clicking a button should increment something. And how can we do that? Well, we can, if I want to increment something, I can create a button, which will be just for incrementing. And you can see that how the button is kind of like pushed down because of the spacer. Spacer is kind of like pushing everything up and also down. So spacer is kind of like somewhere over here, and it's just pushing everything down and up till it hits, well, the place where it cannot be moved any further. And I believe it is called, I always forget, like, how do we change the type of the button? I think it's called prominent or something. I don't know what it's called. But you can actually change, like you can add a button style probably. You can even change the button style to be bordered prominent. And you can see that now your button will look even nicer with a background color of blue. You can change the color and all that stuff. All right. So one of the interesting things about SwiftUI is that the state management, which means that whenever a button is clicked, whenever something happens, the state which carries the data is going to allow your view to be synced with the data. All right, so what does that even mean? Well, let's say that if we are trying to create some sort of an increment counter. So we have the button and we want to show the counter value over here. Now you can already see that this counter value is still 0. It's not really displaying anything. And we're just going to put it kind of like in the center by adding more spacers. And I can go ahead and say large title. So that number is a little bit bigger. There we go. And if we want to increment this, whenever I click a button, this function right there is getting called, meaning the closure. If you look at the button definition, you can see the title and the action. Action is simply a closure, which is going to get invoked, which is going to get called when you click a button. Now, right now, we're not really doing anything over here. So how can we display a value or update the value in our text when we increment or when we click on the button? Our first try, we will create a counter variable and initialize it to be 0 value. Okay, that will be our first try. And then we will assign this to the counter so that the value counter, which is 0, will be displayed, which is displaying. But unfortunately, if I try to update this by incrementing the counter, it's actually going to complain. And the reason it is complaining is that it's saying that, hey, you can't do that. You can't change the property because you are inside a value type. And that is what you're trying to do is a mutating function, meaning you're changing the structure. You're creating kind of like a new structure, in other words. So that's not going to work. But if this is not going to work, then how can we even increment the counter? Without this, we can't increment the counter. So in SwiftUI, they have introduced state management. And if you put a @state property wrapper with the counter, what will happen is this will allow you to increment the counter. And what happens when you increment the counter, it will go to your page, meaning to your view. It will reevaluate this view, and it will look at everything over here that, hey, do I need to redraw you or not? So this is one of the most important steps that usually people get it wrong, because what happens is when you change the state, which we are doing over here, because this is a state, the body gets reevaluated. Reevaluation is different from rendering. Reevaluation is simply saying the SwiftUI is simply saying that, hey, I'm going to reevaluate the body and I'm going to check, do I need to redraw you? Do I need to redraw you? Do I need to redraw you? Do I need to redraw, and which elements, which view I need to redraw? And I'm just going to redraw those views. So whenever the state changes, which we are doing over here, this will cause the body to be re-evaluated. Again, re-evaluation is very different from rendering. Rendering is like, okay, I'm going to recreate that control and render it. Re-evaluation simply means that the body, this property, SwiftUI is going to look at it, and then SwiftUI is going to look at this one, vstack. Well, then it's going to go inside the image. It's going to say, well, did you change when the counter value changed? Were you dependent on the counter value? Did you do anything with the counter? And probably no, you didn't really do anything with the counter. You can see that image is not even interested in any counter thing. Then it's going to go over here to the text, and it's going to ask the same question that, hey, text, did you do anything with the counter? Or did you use the counter? So I need to update you. And the value and the answer is no. And then finally, it will go to this one. And it's going to ask the same question that, hey, text view, did you change because of the counter value? And yes, it actually did change because it was using the counter value. So SwiftUI is going to destroy this view and then recreates it with the new updated value of the counter. So this means that now if I press the increment button, you can see that my counter is incrementing. But every time it is incrementing, only the label or the text view is the one that is getting rendered, re-rendered again and again. So SwiftUI is actually quite smart. It's not going to re-render every single thing in the view, because that will be super expensive. What if I'm simply updating the counter and I have a list of stuff over here and other complicated stuff? The whole view doesn't need to be re-rendered again and again. Only the things that got changed needs to be re-rendered. All right. So that's a very important distinction between evaluation and or re-evaluation and also re-rendering. Right? Anyone have any questions? So that is something that is, if you see online on Twitter or on articles, they always say, oh, this body is fired, so this means that it's getting rendered again. It's not rendering, it's re-evaluating it. It's checking the body if it needs or which element needs to be re-rendered. All right. Now, if I go ahead and do the same thing over here, if I copy this counter and do something over here, now there will be two controls that will need re-rendering because they're both dependent on the counter. Right. Now, there are other controls that will be dependent on the state, and state is something that allows binding. Binding basically means that whatever is in the state, you can put it on the screen, which we are doing it right there. And sometimes in certain scenarios, you have the control directly writing to the state. Let's go ahead and take a look at that example. I'm going to go ahead and create a text field to enter some text. I'm just going to say name. And you can see that the second argument is saying text binding, meaning its text field is saying that when you type some text in the text field, where should that value go? So I'm going to say that that value is going to go to a variable called name. Now let's go ahead and first create that variable, which is of type string, because in text box you can only get string. Well, in most cases, I guess. So this $sign syntax is a new thing in SwiftUI. Well, not new thing in SwiftUI. It's whenever the SwiftUI was released in 2019. So this means binding, which means that whenever you are writing something in the text field, that value that you write in the text field is going to go to the name variable. And it has to be marked with state, because that is going to give it the binding capabilities. All right. Now I can go ahead and put name over here. I mean, it is a string. This means that whenever I type in the text field, this text property will also update. So these two things will need to be re-rendered. So let me type something over here. You can see that if I type in hello over here in the text field, this is a text field. I know it's kind of like hard to see. Let me go ahead and say text field style, rounded border, and probably go ahead and add a little bit of a padding. So you'll see a little bit of spacing, hopefully. There we go. Okay, much better. So now whenever I type in the text field, which is right there at the bottom, as soon as I write something, and it's not really allowing me to write something. Okay, let's build it again. I think running Zoom and Xcode may not be, it's not really liking that, but let's go ahead and see. It's not really allowing me to do anything now. Rounded border? I don't think there's a rounded border. Was there? Okay, kind of weird that it doesn't allow me to write. Well, now it doesn't really allow me to write anything. Okay, that's weird. Let's go ahead and run it in a simulator. Sometimes this Xcode previews, they just work weird. So I'm going to go ahead and run the simulator. I'm trying to see if we can actually write something in the text box. And as soon as we write something in the text box, the text view, which is responsible for displaying, should get updated. So here we go. You can see that works in there. Oh, I didn't really meant to take a picture. All right. So this means that every time you're typing something in the text box, that value goes in the name property, name state variable. And any time you're going to change the state, the body gets reevaluated. And then the SwiftUI goes and then says, hey, image, did you use the name value? Well, no, the image didn't really use anything. And then it's going to go to this one. Text, did you use the name value? And the answer is yes, so that it will destroy this text and it will recreate this text view. So that is what actually happens kind of like behind the scene. All right. Any questions? All right. So all of this state that you create, this state, these states are, what did I do now? These states are invalid character sequence. I think I did something. Okay, not sure what I did over there, but these states are called local variables. I mean, sorry, local state or private state. This state is only available inside the content view. So if you have like hundreds of views, this state is only available inside this view. And views are very, very cheap in SwiftUI, which means that you can create many, many, many different views because it's very fast to recreate them. So if you have a large app, you will have a lot of different views. So let's go ahead and create another view. I'm going to go over here and create another view. I will call it light view because it will have a light bulb that we can turn on. When you create a view, the only property that you need to implement is the body property. And that body property needs to return a particular view, which we are, some sort of a view. Right now, we're just returning a text view. Let's go ahead and try to display this in our content view. Anywhere we can display probably. So I'm just going to say light view over here, I guess. Let's go ahead and refresh it and see if we can display light view. And there's a light view. I mean, it just says light view, but at least we have the light view displayed. All right. Now for light view, what we want to do is we want to, it's kind of slow. It might be the image. So let me go ahead and cancel this image because it might be taking too long. That can be it. Okay. So in the light view, we want to display a button where we can click a button and turn on the light. All right, so I'll say button, and I will try to find out how can I display a button with an image of a light. So this will be the action, meaning the button click, and the label, meaning how you want the button to be created. I can use probably, I think it's called light bulb. And there we go. You can see the light bulb, and we can try to make it bigger by changing the font size. Well, let's see. Font, large title. I think you can also have font size with the actual size, but I'm just going to use large title. All right. And where do I get this light bulb system name? There is an app called San Francisco Symbols, which is available on Apple website, developer Apple website. And you can download this, and they have a lot of symbols. And one of the symbol name is light bulb. I think the other one, I mean, there are so many, but you can see that I can also say heart, heart.fill. So there are many different icons. I think bulb.fill should fill it. There we go. We can probably try to change the foreground color to be yellow. Okay, so it's kind of like outer line is yellow, which looks fine. All right. And now the question is, well, when we click the button, right now it's not on, but when we click the button, we want to fill it up, meaning we want to turn it on. So we will create a state variable, just like the counter. We will say is on, Boolean false. So initially it will be false. And one of the techniques that you use is you only want to remove or change this light bulb string. You want to change it from light bulb, which is right now, which is off, to light bulb.fill. So how do we do that? Well, we can simply go ahead and check the value. If it's on, then you should use light bulb.fill. You return that string, else you will use light bulb, just the light bulb. All right, so right now it's telling me that it is off. You can see that it's not filled up. If I change this to true, and hopefully it will refresh, there we go, it's filled up. So it looks like it's working, but we want it to be clickable. So this means that I would be able to click the button. The button is, this is still a button, but the label of the button, meaning the visual appearance of the button, is an image. You can use an actual image also, but I just decided to use button. And now when you click a button, we can toggle the is on from false to true and true to false. So let's go and click on the button. And there we go. You can see that we are turning it on and off. All right. But this particular state that you just created is a local state or a private state, which is only available inside the light view, which is fine. But now content view, which is the parent of light view, because light view is contained inside the content view, the light view, or the content view is saying that, hey, you know what? Whenever the button or whenever the light is on, I need to know because I need to change something on my end also. So this content view is like saying that whenever the light view is changing, I need to know also when you're changing it. And that poses a problem because this is on variable is local state. It's actually, even I just named it private, and it's only available inside there. So one of the ways we can solve this problem is by changing this into something called a binding. That's another property wrapper that was introduced in SwiftUI. Binding is a little bit different than state. State is only available inside the light view component, but binding over here, it's going to make sure that, well, first of all, we have to pass the binding. And whenever the light view is going to change the binding from true to false or false to true, then the person or the parent who passed in the binding will also be reevaluated. This means that in the content view, I can create a state, and I can create it like a private state is on. It's nothing more than a state. And in the light view, now I have to pass in something. I think it's like is on. And I will pass always, when you're passing a binding, you always use the $sign. So is on is their label. And what we're passing over here, we may have to say over here like this. This is private. Okay, this shouldn't be private, sorry. This is fine, I guess. Okay. Right. So now what's going to happen is that the light view, when we're creating the light view, we pass in the binding, which is coming from the content view, which is right, this one. We pass it to the light view. And inside the light view, we toggle is on, off, on, off. So whenever you turn it on or off, not only the light view get reevaluated and re-rendered, but the content view, the person who passed in the binding, also gets reevaluated. Now, at this particular moment, when you change the value of the light view, the content view will not get anything re-rendered because I never really use is on anywhere, right? But let's go ahead and use it. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to say frame I'm just trying to make sure that the VStack is actually taking up the whole space. So I can change the background color. Color.red. Let's see if it actually changes the color of the whole screen or the whole VStack to red. Okay, so it's red. So now we can toggle this particular color. If the binding is on, then it's red, or else it's blue. And obviously you can use different colors. So now I'm going to go ahead and press on the button, press on this light view. The light view is going to toggle from false to true, but since it is binding, it's also going to tell the content view that, hey, since you pass in the binding, that binding has been updated, that value has been updated, and you should reevaluate yourself and see that which controls needs to be refreshed. So in this case, the background was the only thing that needs to be refreshed or re-rendered, so we re-rendered the background. So now you can see that when you're actually changing this, the background of the parent, which is the content view, is also changing. All right, so binding is especially interesting and useful for scenarios where your child needs to communicate something to the parent, and based on the child action, the parent needs to reevaluate and probably re-render some of the views, which we are doing over here. All right. So this will be, any questions regarding anything we discussed? All right, so this will be kind of like a very basic introduction for things that we have learned over here about, especially the state and the binding is very important. So in the next section, we're going to go, I think, a little bit more deeper into what is environment, what is state object, what is observe object, and all those different things. We're going to hopefully take a look at that. But hopefully after this session, you will have a little bit more idea of SwiftUI and state and binding, and most importantly, difference between re-evaluation versus re-rendering. Just because the body is getting fired does not mean that everything inside the body will be rebuilt from scratch. Only things that are needed will be rebuilt from scratch. They will be kicked out, and a new version of that thing will replace the old thing. All right. So that is pretty much it for today. Thank you so much for joining. Hopefully we can do it next week also. Hopefully more people will join, but hopefully you have learned a little bit about SwiftUI and how the state management actually works, at least the state and the binding. There are some other options also, which we can take a look at it later. All right. And if you don't have any questions, that will pretty much be it.